Since the history of Star Wars lightsaber ignition sounds, the first video I've ever uploaded is doing really well. Here's the sequel after 10,000 subscribers. No, I'm not a goddamn PokeTuber. Hyperdrives manipulated hypermatter particles in order to thrust the starship into hyperspace while preserving the ship's mass energy profile. Travel distance significantly, allowing the vessel to jump from a significant point to another without having to travel directly in between them, reducing journey time by extraordinary large margin. A vessel's ability to travel so hyperspace depended. Screw this! If you're interested in real Star Wars lore and want to know the personal history about Jabba's Dancer Extra number 4, I suggest you go read Wikipedia or go watch one of Icart's Ladder's videos. He makes really good videos about in-depth Star Wars lore. No, today I'm going to talk about the history of hyperspace in Star Wars film in a film logic sense. No reading the Star Wars visual dictionary or novels written by bigger nerds than me, or supplementary comics from Marvel, even though most of them are really good and you should definitely go check them out. Today we're gonna just talk about what the characters say and what the movie tells us through visuals.
All strap yourselves in, I'm gonna make a jump to light speed.
The hyperdrive. It's a simple device in the Star Wars universe that lets characters go from point A to point B through a wormhole, right? Like the scene explained in Interstellar so dummies can understand what wormholes are.
So a wormhole bends space like this, so you can take a shortcut through a higher dimension.
Wrong. Hyperspace in Star Wars is anything but a wormhole, and you're gonna see exactly why. So let's take a look at all the movies and figure out what the fuck hyperdrive is. Today's video will be a bumpy and confusing ride, so strap on viewers, let's begin. Don't worry, I put more thought into hyperspace than George Lucas, JJ, Ryan or Lawrence Kasdan ever did.
Take these two over to the garage, will you? I want them cleaned up before dinner.
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
We'll start with the first Star Wars movie, Star Wars. In this movie, hyperspace does not play a major part of the story, but it's the first and somehow only movie where hyperspace is explained by the characters in-universe. Yeah, I don't think we ever got any explanation of how hyperspace works in any other Star Wars movie except the first one. The character who explains is Han Solo in the scene where our heroes depart Tatooine, so let's hear him out. We're gonna take notes here because we're going to talk about the rules of hyperspace a lot in this video. The three important lines from Han Solo are: Number 1.
We'll be safe enough once we make the jump to hyperspace.
Number 2.
Take a few moments to get the coordinates from the navigation.
Number 3.
Traveling through hyperspace ain't like dusting crops, boy. Without precise calculations, we'd fly right through a star or bounce too close to a supernova and that'd end your trip real quick, wouldn't it?
Okay, so the first line is, we'll be safe once we jump into hyperspace. This implies that you can't follow and track ships in hyperspace, since the Falcon is being chased by 2 Star Destroyers, aka the best ships the Empire has. Even the biggest, baddest ships can't follow and track ships when the other ship goes into hyperspace. So the first rule is, ships can't track and follow other ships in hyperspace. The second line is that get coordinates from the Navicomputer. So we can imply that the space between planets in Star Wars universe is really dangerous because there are supernovas, stars, space debris, other planets, asteroids floating around between planets. So you need something like a GPS on a ship so you can calculate a safe path between point A and point B. So the second rule is, ships need to calculate a route between destinations to jump into hyperspace. The third line is, we could fly through a star or a supernova and that would end our trip. This implies that ships in Star Wars can collide with other things like stars and supernovas, and that will destroy the ship. Notice how Han Solo never mentions what will happen to the star or supernova if a ship traveling through hyperspace hits it. Will the star or supernova explode? Oh boy. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The third rule is, ships can collide with other objects in the way and get destroyed if not careful. There is a fourth rule, not mentioned by Han Solo, but from Tarkin and Darth Vader, and that is,
Are they away?
They've just made the jump into hyperspace.
You're sure the homing beacon is secure aboard their ship?
we can imply that the fourth rule is, ships can track ships in hyperspace as long as they have a tracking beacon. Finally, there's one fifth hidden rule that I think is implied but is never mentioned by the characters, and that is, Ships need to get out of a planet's gravitational field to make the jump into hyperspace. I mean, why does the Falcon wait a few bits after leaving Tatooine to make the jump into hyperspace? Why have the TIE fighter dogfight scene after they leave the Death Star? If this fifth rule didn't exist, they could just made the jump into hyperspace the moment they left the hangar of the Death Star. Anyways, these 5 rules are simple, right? So it will be easier for future movie directors to follow it, right?
Yeah. Fantastic. So I have a sharp.
Well, I guess you don't know everything about women yet.
Since we got the rules set by the first movie, let's talk about the sequel, the best Star Wars movie, a flawless masterpiece of great storytelling.
No. I am your father.
Good characters.
I love you.
I know.
Groundbreaking special effects. Awesome music and sounds. But the movie makes zero logical sense in a technological sense. Why, you may ask? Well, this is the first movie where hyperspace becomes a plot device that drives the story. And somehow this happens 2 more times in the Star Wars franchise. Anyways, the plot of Empire Strikes Back wouldn't even have happened if it wasn't for one thing, the hyperdrive of the Millennium Falcon.
Oh yeah? Watch this.
Watch what?
If I may say so, sir, I noticed earlier the hyperdrive motivator has been damaged. It's impossible to go to light speed.
Because the hyperdrive of the Falcon broke, Han Solo and Leia end up getting captured by Vader, which leads to Luke confronting Vader. Yeah, so the hyperdrive in Empire is really important, but there is another factor that needs to be discussed, and that is time. We need to talk about the scale of time. In other words, how long was Luke on Dagobah getting trained by Yoda? We really need to talk about this. So in the last movie, it was shown that hyperspace is really fast. Like you can reach from Tatooine to Alderaan in a couple of minutes, because the length of scene where Luke trains the ball was the length it took them to reach the destination.
Anyway, we should be at Alderaan about 0200 hours. Looks like we're coming up on Alderaan.
But the hyperdrive on the Falcon is broken, so they have to travel from the asteroids near Hoth to Bespin without a hyperdrive. During that time, Luke gets trained by Yoda on Dagobah. Boba Fett tracks them, alerts Vader, and Vader and the Empire go to Bespin to prepare for their arrival.
I had no choice. They arrived right before you did.
So how long did it take for Han and Leia to arrive in Bespin? In real life, it takes 4.24 years for light to reach from Proxima Centauri, the nearest star to us, to Earth. Obviously, it didn't take them years for the Falcon to travel between Hoth and Bespin. It's implied it took them about days or maybe weeks for them to reach Cloud City. So we can conclude that ships without hyperspace are still faster than the speed of light somehow.
No light speed. No light speed. No light speed.
I guess that just reaffirms my theory that space and time make zero sense in Star Wars, and I'm putting way too much thought into something that George Lucas, Irvin Kershner, and Lars Kasdan didn't care of.
It's not fair.
And one last thing, we established in the rules of hyperspace with Rule 1 and 4 that ships can only track ships through hyperspace as long as they have a tracking beacon. So the question is, why didn't the Empire install a tracker onto the Falcon at Cloud City? Was Darth Vader that arrogant to believe they'll never fix it and get away?
Did your men deactivate the hyperdrive on the Millennium Falcon?
You did it!
There's one thing I want to mention from the last movie, and that is how did Luke travel from Hoth to Dagobah, and why did Luke not get chased by the Empire like the Falcon did?
We're going to the Dagobah system.
The most probable answer was that Luke's X-Wing was able to fly through hyperspace and then reach Dagobah, then Bespin. Then came the question, can X-Wings go into hyperspace? Weirdly, we never see the X-Wing go into hyperspace in Empire Strikes Back. The scene just cuts after Luke says they're going to Dagobah. It was until Return of the Jedi until we got this iconic scene. All of the rebel starships, the Mount Calamari capital ships, and small starfighters like XYAB wings jumping into hyperspace together into the final battle, while confirming that small starfighters can go into hyperspace.
Oh crap! Prepare to jump into hyperspace on my mark!
And this scene always bugged me. You see, I thought that capital ships like Star Destroyers and medium-sized shuttles like the Falcon should only be the ones able to go into hyperspace. Star Wars is based on real-life jets and small airplanes, and those kind of fighter jets usually stay on an aircraft carrier and don't travel long distances, right? I don't know, just a disclaimer. I'm not a military aircraft expert, but I think my logic makes sense. Like, what's the point of having docking bays on big capital ships if all of your small starfighters can go long distance in hyperspace travel? It makes no sense hoarding small starfighters that can travel long distances in one spot, so it can be blown up all at once. Anyways, this movie implies that hyperdrives are very common, and even small ships like X-Wings have them, which creates a problem for the next movie. Now we're in the prequel era, and for the second time in Star Wars movie history, a malfunction of the hyperdrive is another crucial plot point, and it still isn't the last. In this movie, our heroes try to escape Naboo on the Queen's shuttle, but the hyperdrive is broken after getting hit by turbo lasers of the Trade Federation starships. So instead of flying directly to Coruscant, they decide to make a stopover at Tatooine to fix the hyperdrive. Like, if it wasn't for the hyperdrive breaking, Qui-Gon would have never gone to Tatooine, never found Anakin. Anakin would never become a Jedi, Palpatine wouldn't have a new apprentice, and there will be no Darth Vader. And people say Jar Jar caused the rise of the Empire, even though it was all started by the hyperdrive malfunctioning. Darth hyperdrive confirmed! Anyways, we see what a hyperdrive actually looks like for the first time, and it looks like this. Qui-Gon goes into a city to buy a new hyperdrive and then gets into a bet with Watto so he can win it through Anakin winning the pod race. Now in the last movie it was established that spaceships that have hyperdrives in them are really fucking common, which leads to the plot hole. Why doesn't Qui-Gon just buy or rent a different starship from a different dealer that accepts Republican credits, or hire someone like Obi-Wan did in episode 4? Mr. Plinkett actually pointed this out in his famous Phantom Menace review.
Why don't you trade the Naboo cruiser for a less fancy but functional ship? Or maybe hire a transport. Pay them all the money you have now and then promise more when you get to Coruscant. Sound familiar? Someone who's like a transport ship captain or a smuggler would have use for Republic credits.
Then again, it would have been funny to see Queen Amidala with her fancy clothes get into the cockpit of an X-Wing or something.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
Not much to talk about hyperspace in this movie, but there is one new device that was introduced to Star Wars mythos in this movie that needs to be discussed. So we now have Jedi starfighters, and it seems these starships can't go into hyperspace by themselves. Instead, we get these rings.
You gotta fly through rings.
Basically, starships can dock into these hyperdrive rings, and then these rings take the starship into hyperspace. I actually really like this concept. I guess starships will be more small and nimble without something heavy like a hyperdrive on it. It's just a shame because I think this concept should have applied to all starships in the Star Wars universe, including X-Wings and Jedi, because of the whole capital ship docking bay debacle I previously mentioned. Like, all X-Wings should throw away the hyperdrives on their ships so it can be more nimble in battle, and rely on rings if they want to go into hyperspace.
More rings? Yeah. What kind of game is this? Is this some sort of insanity test?
Surprisingly, this movie is the one with the least to talk about hyperspace in all of Star Wars. Hyperspace has barely any effect on the story, so I don't have much to say with this one. I'll just say this though. Why is there a runway on Coruscant in a universe where all ships fly up vertically, George? Why does the gravity of the invisible hand change when they're falling down in space? We finally get to Disney Star Wars, the main meat of the video. The 5 rules we established in the first movie are gonna be high grounded, cut up, and left to die on a lava bank. There are gonna be so many quirks about hyperspace in these movies, so let's start breaking down with The Force Awakens. The first scene where we see hyperspace is the scene where Rey, Finn, Han, and Chewie escape from the hangar with those Cthulhu monsters. Han tries to hyperspace jump straight from the hangar, and Rey asks,
"From inside the hangar, is that even possible?"
I never asked that question till after I've done it.
I guess the reason why she even asked the question is because Rule 5 of the rules of hyperspace does indeed exist, where you can't be in gravity if you want to jump into hyperspace. Does a hangar bay in a small ship count as a gravitational field? Whatever. Then after that, we get to the part where the Falcon gets inside the shield protecting Starkiller Base by exiting out of hyperspace between the shield and the planet. It's actually explained in dialogue how it's possible.
How are we getting in?
Their shields have a fractional refresh rate, keeps anything traveling slower than light speed from getting through.
We're making our landing approach at light speed?
But makes you wonder, the distance between the shield and the surface of Starkiller Base is only like a dozen of kilometers, and space is giant massive. And considering the speed of hyperspace, I think Han would have had like a 0.000000001 second open window of scoring the exit without colliding with Starkiller Base.
Alright, Chewie, get ready. And now!
I guess Han was able to pull it off because of the Force, lazy writing, he had a good gaming chair, or 1 in a million.
Great shot, kid! That was 1 in a million!
Bor Gullet will know the truth.
We are now at the movie where every Disney hater Star Wars fans seem to like, cause it's the most faithful to the George Lucas vision or something. But here's a shocker. This was the first movie that broke the rules of hyperspace, not The Last Jedi.
It's not true. That's impossible.
Well, you see, when the Death Star fires on Jedha, and our heroes are trying to depart the planet while leaving Saw Gerrera behind, this happens.
Punch it. I haven't completed my calculations. I'll make them for you.
How the fuck did they did that? They went into hyperspace while being inside the atmosphere of Jedha, near ground. This completely breaks Rule 5 and creates the question, why doesn't every ship just depart into hyperspace in the atmosphere? Why do you have to wait until you get to space? I'm so surprised no one complains about this scene in Rogue One.
Seriously, what the fuck?
Let's talk about the last scene as well. The only reason idiot fans even like Rogue One is because of the final Darth Vader scene, and there is one glaring plot hole that no one seems to mention as well, and that is, why didn't the Tantive get away with the Death Star plans?
And yes, it's pronounced Tantive.
Tantive.
That's from the old radio drama.
When Vader and the Stormtroopers boarded the Rebel ship, Leia's ship, the Tantive, got away from the Rebel capital ship pretty quickly. There is no scene where Vader put the tracker on the Tantive. So how the fuck did Vader track down Leia's ship at the opening of the New Hope, based on the events of Rogue One? How did Vader know they were going to Tatooine? It completely breaks the first rule of hyperspace. Like literally the movie's last scene is the Tantive getting away. They should be free. Also, please don't comment, oh, it's explained in the books or comics that the Empire secretly put a tracker on the ship, or whatever. I should not be required to buy supplementary material or read a director's or writer's tweets to fix a plot hole. I'm looking at you, Chris Terrio and Zack Snyder. The scene keeps bugging me, and people say Rian Johnson broke hyperspace, even though the previous movie already broke the rules before that.
Salt.
Not fighting what we hate. Saving what we love.
Now we're finally in some choppy water. The movie everyone was probably waiting patiently for me to talk about for 2 reasons: hyperspace tracking and hyperspace suicide ramming. First, let's talk about hyperspace tracking. The Resistance army thought they escaped the First Order, but the First Order tracks them and catches up.
Found us. That's impossible.
This movie actually makes more sense than Rogue One because the characters like Leia actually are surprised and addresses it towards the audience.
They've tracked us through light speed.
That's impossible.
Because they know the first rule of hyperspace. The audience is left to wonder if they have a mole in their ranks, and Rose predicts that Snoke's flagship has new technology that allows ships to track hyperspace.
Hyperspace tracking is new tech, but the principle must be the same as any active tracker.
So they're only tracking us from the lead ship.
I mean, it's been 30 years since the original trilogy, so I can accept that they have come up with a new technology in universe that allows hyperspace tracking. It was also foreshadowed in Rogue One because the Empire was already researching hyperspace tracking long before they fell.
Hyperspace tracking, navigational systems.
So I have no problem with hyperspace tracking in the movie. But now let's talk about the main highlight of the movie, the infamous scene where Admiral Holder kamikazes the Resistance ship into the First Order by jumping into hyperspace.
Fire on that cruiser!
A lot of people say this scene broke Star Wars because it raises the questions. Why didn't the rebels use that to destroy the Death Star by ramming it with a ship with hyperspace? What's the point of a Death Star? You can just ram a Star Destroyer into a planet with droids in them and it'll probably get destroyed. Remember at the start of the video, I said hyperspace is anything but a wormhole. I said that because with a wormhole, you don't have to worry about colliding with other objects in the way, because you're bending space itself. There are no objects in the way, but the rules of hyperspace states that you have to route a path between destinations, or else you can collide with a supernova or fly through a star.
Traveling through hyperspace ain't like dust and crops, boy. Without precise calculations, we'd fly right through a star or bounce too close to a supernova and that'd end your trip real quick, wouldn't it?
But think about this. You disappear into nothingness when you go into hyperspace, and appear out of thin air when you exit hyperspace. Then why do you need to route a path? And a spaceship will collide with an object if you don't route a path. Are the ships just turning invisible when they go into hyperspace? Or is it because they're just super fast? Hey, what if some idiot X-Wing pilot accidentally plots a wrong route and hyperspace jumps straight through Coruscant? Will the whole planet explode? Maybe only the X-Wing will explode and Coruscant will be fine. But why would the planet be fine? Oh, it makes no goddamn sense, and I feel like I'm wasting my life by thinking too much of this shit. You know, the only possible way I can explain this scene is that if you think of hyperspace as a wormhole, there is a point in hyperspace jumping, which is in between when you start the jump and you disappear into nothingness into a wormhole. If you collide with an object right before you disappear into hyperspace at maximum speed, you can collide with the other ship. That's why the characters say the Holdo maneuver is 1 in a million chance, because it's hard to get that point just right. It's a theory, but it only works by breaking the rules of hyperspace by calling it a wormhole. My head hurts. I'll just say this though. This scene should have never happened, because it opened a can of worms larger than the size of the Death Star.
And I want you to get out of this office right now. Out.
Ted, I got your voucher.
Out!
I don't have people. I'm alone.
Solo.
You thought I would talk about Rise of Skywalker, but there is one movie we need to discuss before doing that. This movie finally shows the infamous Kessel Run.
It's a ship that made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs.
We see that the planet Kessel is surrounded by giant black holes and a cloud of dust called the Maelstrom, and you have to follow this beacon trail to get to Kessel. Again, proving that hyperspace isn't a wormhole, because if it was a wormhole, you can just bypass this black hole cloud. Hey, come to think of it, why can't you plan a hyperspace route that follows the beacon trail? Why do you have to slow down in the beacon path? Why not go through it in light speed? I mean hyperspace.
There is logic in what he says.
Rey Skywalker.
Now we get to the final movie, and after the backlash of the hyperspace ramming scene in Last Jedi, I thought JJ wouldn't try to tamper with the fans by taking another jab at hyperspace, but boy, I was wrong. Again, hyperspace becomes a crucial plot point, but this time because of space routing. First, we now have Exegol, a planet that you need to go through an Orange Nebula to reach. You need a wayfinder apparently to reach there, so I'm guessing this Exegol is similar to Kessel from Solo, in that it's surrounded by a nebula instead of black holes. Apparently you need to exit hyperspace, pass the nebula, and then go into hyperspace again. What? Anyways, that's why the planet was so hard to reach and get out of, because of this orange nebula.
Which isn't easy on Exegol. Ships that size need help taking off. Nav can't tell which way's up out there.
So how do the ships take off?
They use a signal from a navigation tower like this one.
My question is though, why the fuck did Palpatine keep a bunch of Star Destroyers in this place? Hoarding all your Star Destroyer that can destroy planets in a place that is hard to escape was a stupid idea on Palpatine's part. How about you send out your Fortnite signal broadcast after the Star Destroyers have exited Exegol and spread them out?
The Resistance is dead. The Sith flame will burn. All worlds surrender or die. The final order begins.
2 hours later.
Then again, Palpatine is also the same guy who tried to pull off planet-killing machines 4 times and failed 4 times miserably. Second, we now have a new hyperspace maneuver, something called lightspeed skipping.
What are you doing? Lightspeed skipping!
Okay, so my understanding of this scene is that Poe is jumping to hyperspace and exiting out of hyperspace without routing a path multiple times, and sort of skipping like skipping pebbles on a lake. That's fine, but I have 2 problems. First, they're breaking Rule 5 because they keep entering and exiting out of hyperspace not in empty space, but in the atmosphere of planets. However, Rogue One already threw that rule out the window, so whatever. However, my second problem is bigger, and that is, how the fuck are the TIE fighters following them? Based on Rule 1, you can't follow another ship into hyperspace without a tracker. In The Last Jedi, the First Order was able to track them because of new technology that they have in their fancy Muse capital ship. But this is just a couple TIE fighters. Does TIE fighters have this new technology just to track ships in hyperspace? Hyperspace tracking device in The Last Jedi took up an entire room, and now the technology is small enough to fit in a small, dinky little TIE fighter? Ugh!
That just makes no fucking sense. I mean, it's just bullshit.
My brain almost exploded right there, so let's get to the end. So we've learned that hyperspace in Star Wars doesn't make a lick of sense. The technology of Star Wars universe makes 0 sense, and I think I wasted my time researching this, and you wasted your time watching this video of me trying to comprehend nonsense. However, my attitude towards hyperspace can be summed up with this line by Daniel Craig in Knives Out, directed by your favorite Star Wars director.
It makes no damn sense. Compels me though.
It makes no sense, but it's interesting as hell, and fun to think about. Also, I'll say this, Star Wars is not science fiction. Star Wars is science fantasy. If you want to think and complain about Einstein's relative theory or other quantum physics, I suggest you go watch classic Star Trek. In Star Wars, it's about the characters in the story, and the adventure, not science. Like, if you want to poke holes in the inner workings of Star Wars physics, think about this. Why the fuck is there sound in Star Wars battles? No one can hear you scream in space, right? Why do spaceships make sounds? And why do blaster lasers make sound in space battles? Bottom line, Star Wars give no fuck about physics, and you shouldn't too.